Hello to you. My name is Jesse R. Johnson. This is feeling of being to infinity. People sometimes notice themselves that they do not feel good. They do not feel strong. They do not find themselves free to be emotionally expressive or sympathetic. And they try all types of methods to cure themselves of this. They may try to develop a counter emotion. If they are depressive types, they try to be very jolly and outgoing. If they are not sympathetic with people, they try to get really interested and really put out energy and love vibrations, make love stares at everybody, and constantly tell people how much they love them. Or they may use psychiatric methods to get themselves to be more emotional. They may review their past, trying to locate memories that cause them to be emotionally rigid, or memories that are a kind of wound that is preventing them from being emotional. Or they may watch their dreams to see if they can find some keys in their dreaming that will unlock their emotional power. Or they may try to become religious. They may read a lot about religion. They may go to religious organizations and try to believe something great about reality that will make them able to feel more strongly, feel more openly, just feel happy and not resistive and contracted. Or they may try to fall in love all the time, again and again and again. They may indulge themselves sexually and become very promiscuous. They may try to make a lot of friends. They may look to be loved. They may indulge themselves physically, creating a sense of feeling pleasure about themselves by being full of food, never empty, never not eating, never not sexing. They may talk compulsively. They may think compulsively as a way of generating an energy in themselves to counter their feeling of depression and emptiness. They may make themselves very helpful to people by engaging in humanitarian works, social motivations, do-goodism. They might want to teach people to go about and tell people where it's at in order to confirm to themselves that there's something true they can feel good about, and so on, and on and on and on. In other words, everybody, not just a few people, everybody, not just a few people who cannot be expressive emotionally, but everybody is doing something to cure what he or she regards to be a disease of emotion. And yet, the reasons for being emotionally retarded, emotionally dissociative, or emotionally disturbed are not eliminated through all the things that people are doing. Anyone can, in some moment, perhaps, feel a little better, but people fail in the ultimate sense. They do not become, finally, simply happy. Whatever you are doing, then, socially, physically, mentally, psychically, or emotionally, is a dramatization of an emotional disease, or what I would rather call a disease of feeling. By feeling, I do not mean merely emotion in the sense that you could engage in a counter effort to your obstructed emotionality or obstructed feeling by becoming more and more emotional. By feeling, I mean the feeling of being, the feeling of existing, the feeling of existence, which cannot be compartmentalized or compartmented into that neurological portion of ourselves in which we acknowledge emotion, but which is really an occupation of the entire personality. The total body-mind is established in this feeling. Feeling is as much a part of mind as it is of emotion. It is just as much a physical matter or a social matter. It is equally a psychic or psychological matter. It is a spiritual matter. Every aspect of the being is or is established in the feeling of being, the feeling of existing. Therefore, even though what I call feeling is obviously related to what you acknowledge to be emotion, it is not a feeling that can be compartmentalized, separated from body or mind, located in a portion of the brain or a portion of the anatomy of the chest. Every part of the being, every aspect of the body-mind, psyche, thinking, mind, emotion, body, your relational or social life, and so forth, is a limit on the feeling of being, a limit on the feeling of existing, a dramatization of self-contraction, and therefore to recover the feeling of being, or to be unobstructed in feeling, you must not become more emotional merely by developing the emotional aspect of yourself. Rather, the entire body-mind must submit to be total, to be that, to feel that, and without obstruction. The spiritual process involves the liberation of energy and attention from bondage, from contraction, from limitation. And limited or obstructed energy and attention are both signatures and signed by the same phenomenon, the limitation of the feeling of being, the feeling of existing. Whatever arises, you do not feel completely. You do not feel freely. You do not feel simply. You are limited in your feeling relative to every single thing, everything, absolutely everything. And so your fundamental disease, even though it is unnecessary and therefore could be called imaginary, is a limitation on feeling. But rather than just feeling diseased emotionally and perhaps altogether, and trying to overwhelm your limitation with some other effort, some palliative or medication or regimen whereby you hope to relieve yourself, you must first simply and profoundly observe your own characteristic limitations. And you are helped to observe your characteristic limitation through my argument of meditation, through my play of meditation. This is what I do. Although that is not all that I do. One who is awakened beyond the disease of being, beyond the disease of having a contrived constructor of existing, helps other people to realize the true or divine condition. Hold on, please, just for a second. Now, to continue, to realize the divine condition, you must go through a process of self-transcendence. That process begins with considering meditation relative to the self-contraction, the limit on feeling. And how do you consider meditation? Not merely by thinking philosophically, but by observing yourself no matter what you are doing, even while thinking philosophically. Now, this work helps you to become sensitive to yourself altogether and to enter into a profound incident of self-awareness, true self-awareness, not some thought-up, intellectualized self-awareness which gets you nowhere, but the incident of true self-awareness in which you will observe not merely that you are diseased or unhappy, and not merely that you are emotionally disturbed or in any other way disturbed, or even in every way disturbed, but that you are doing just that. You are in fact producing the effects of that. You are doing that. You are being unhappy because you are doing it. You yourself are the action that is your neurosis, your limitation. It is not merely something that is externally happening to you, or simply something that is happening to the body-mind, or that happened sometime or other in the past, or that is somewhere in the organs of the body or in the brain. It is nowhere in time or space outside of yourself. You are the very party, the very process that is the limitation creating the phenomena you notice and acknowledge to be your unhappiness. And so your happiness is not per se a disease at all. A disease is like a sore foot. It is down there on the foot. A foot is something you treat objectively. Your own unhappiness is not an objective disease. It is an internal action. That is another reason I call it imaginary, an imaginary disease, because it is an internal action created by your own self, because it is not a disease in any case. It is an action. It is something that you are doing. Pinching yourself is not a disease, but if you do not notice that you are pinching yourself, then the pinch gradually becomes chronic, even prolonged, painful. You react to it in various ways, and your whole style of life begins to change around it. You could call that pain a disease then. But the action of pinching yourself is not a disease. It is just an action. If you noticed you are doing it, you could stop it, and all the symptoms would disappear as well. Even without great insight, people can acknowledge that they are suffering, that they are uncomfortable, that they are unhappy. Certainly in private conversation they will confess it, even though they are doing all kinds of things to make themselves feel better all the time. That is why people think so much. Think. That is why they emote so much. Emotion. That is why they desire so much. Desires this, desires that, and desire this and that. That is why they do so much and do so many things. And that is also why they suffer so much. This includes you. The search to release suffering is itself a form of suffering. It is not the solution to suffering. You must do more than notice that you are suffering and strive to eliminate it. That is only minimally intelligent and ultimately fruitless. That more that you must do is something that I am illustrating in this talk in this particular way of you pinching yourself. You must observe yourself more profoundly, much more thoroughly, than merely to acknowledge that you do not feel so good, or that you are generally unhappy, or complicated, or obstructed, or contracted. You must observe yourself thoroughly and moment to moment, in every single detail, and truly and directly and altogether, not merely by thinking about yourself. Merely observe yourself in every sense altogether, including your tendency to be thinking and mulling over everything. Observe yourself until you get beyond the mere acknowledgement that you do not feel so good, and beyond the tendency to try to feel good. Observe that this is not feeling good. Observe that this not feeling good is something you are doing. It is not something that is simply happening to you. Unhappiness is not the inherent condition of cosmic nature, or of the body-mind, or of manifest existence. It is something added to conditional existence. It is a reaction to all of that. A person who has been pinching their self, his or herself, for a long time, and who finds out that that is what he or she is doing, stops doing it. Understanding is like that. That is how understanding is. It relieves you of the concept of the disease, and it relieves you of the effort to solve a problem. It puts you in a direct, different position altogether. the position of responsibility, the position of responsibility for a primitive mechanism that you are doing, that you are animating, and that you do not have to do, something that you do not have to animate. There must be this understanding or the discovery that what you acknowledge to be a disease, unhappiness, obstruction, and so forth is simply something that you yourself are doing, something that you are fully responsible for, something that is without necessity, without requirement, something that you are adding to conditional existence, something that you are animating. In fact, instead of just simply being, instead of simply truly and fully existing. And if there is this understanding, if you stop pinching yourself, so to speak, if you simply stand prior to this gesture of pinching, prior to this gesture of unhappiness, then you are in a position to contact, to locate, to be aware of, to be intimate with, and then to be submitted to the condition in which you truly exist, in which you always already exist, in which all of cosmic nature exists, in which all beings exist. And having located that, you can practice the way. Practice of the way is primarily submission to the divine condition. Practice makes use of this capability for insight. It makes use of all kinds of disciplines that serve your equanimity, or that release energy and attention from habitual tendencies that simply dramatize unhappiness. But primarily, practice is submission to the supreme divine condition of being. Primarily, then, practice of the way is feeling without obstruction. Therefore, in every moment, different circumstances may arise, of which they do, and therefore in every moment you tend to limit feelings in a different fashion. In a moment of desire, you limit feelings to what is desirable, to what you are seeking to attain, to the sensations and activities associated with desire and its fulfillment. In a moment of thinking, you exercise the limitation of feeling by limiting attention to the conceptual categories of thought. In a moment of emotional reaction, you limit the feeling to the emotional force of reactivity, fear, sorrow, anger, what is called love, in the conventions of gesturing to one another socially. Every object, every condition that arises mechanically suggests or calls into being a different kind of limitation on feeling. And you typically become that limitation. No matter what arises, you take on that limitation. And because you chronically take on a limitation in every moment, over time you begin to get the sense that you are unhappy, that you are obstructed, and your search to become happy becomes intensified. Some people keep looking for something more, something else, something in the conventional round of things, some solution that still may hold out to them the possibility of being completely free and happy. But some people eventually get the lesson of life. I want you to go to, this ends part 1. Please go to part 2, and part 2 will begin where part 1 left off. And I want to thank everyone for coming to part 1. Now please meet me at part 2, and have a very good day.